Good morning. What we're going to talk about today is the unit of competency, which is use hand and power tools from Certificate 3 in plant operation. This module is in 3 learner books, so you can open your book to learner book number 1, module number 1, and we'll start from there. Okay, introduction. This course is based on the National Unit of Competency from the RISAM 203D, and the unit is called the Use of Hand and Power Tools. This course covers the use of hand and power tools in the resources and infrastructure industries. It also includes planning and preparing of work, selecting and using hand tools and power tools, and cleaning up. Introduction. This unit is appropriate for those working in the operational, service and maintenance roles at work sites within civil construction, coal mining, drilling, extractive industries and metalliferous mining. Upon successful completion of this course, learners will be eligible to be deemed competent by the registered training organisation to use hand and power tools. Compliance documentation. Compliance documentation provides guidelines and information needed for you to work safely within the law. It includes legislative, organisation and site requirements as well as procedures. It includes manufacturers' guidelines and specifications. It also covers Australian standards, and it covers codes of practice, employment and workplace relations legislation. It also covers equal opportunity, disability and discrimination legislation. Okay, we're going to talk now about accessing, interpreting and applying compliance documentation. Compliance documentation should be referred to before starting a job, as it will provide useful information to assist you to plan for the job. During your site induction, you will be told how to access the documentation relevant and appropriate to your duties and your site. Interpretation of compliance documentation refers to getting the key information out of the document that allows you to make correct decisions for each situation. It relates to understanding what is required of you and how you are expected to perform the tasks. Okay, accessing, interpreting and applying compliance documentation. When interpreting documentation, it is vital that you understand the difference between words such as should, consider and must. Should indicates a preferred course of action, which means you need to be able to justify why you did something else in the event of an incident occurring. Consider means you have a choice of actions and need to select the action that will give you the best and safest result. Must requires or mandatory. All mean that action is a legal requirement and must be complied with. Okay, accessing, interpreting and applying compliance documentation. Applying the information within compliance documentation relates to following the directions in the documents. Using a range of mediums. In order to be able to interpret and understand compliance documentation and hence apply it to your work roles, you must develop your knowledge. So using a range of mediums, there are a number of ways that you can learn more about compliance documentation in the workplace, and these can include human resources, such as your supervisor and other authorised personnel or workers, reading other applicable documents, such as policies and procedures, safe work method statements, workplace signage, workplace bulletins, and OH&S or stroke work health and safety reports. Accessing appropriate government websites, attending formal training such as a workplace course or distance learning. It is important that you show a willingness to learn more about compliance documentation and its application in your workplace. Discuss with your supervisor the range of options available. Occupational health and safety. It is important that you comply with all occupational health and safety or work health and safety legislation. Harmonisation of work health and safety legislation. In response to industry calls for greater national consistency, the Commonwealth states and territories have agreed to implement nationally harmonised work health and safety legislation to commence on January the 1st, 2012. While not all states and territories have actually implemented the model work health and safety legislation, it is important to be aware of these changes, as all states and territories will eventually implement them. Occupation health and safety, work health and safety. Harmonisation aims to develop consistent, reasonable and effective safety standards and protections for all Australians working through uniform work health and safety laws, regulations and codes of practice. Occupation health and safety, work health and safety. The key elements of the work health and safety legislation are: following the key elements of the legislation will impact the way you do your job and the responsibilities of your workplace. 1. There is a primary duty of care requiring persons conducting a business or undertaking, which is called the PCBU, to ensure, so far as is reasonably practicable, the health and safety of workers and others who may be affected by the carrying out of that work. 2. There is a requirement that officers of corporations and unincorporated bodies exercise due diligence to ensure compliance. 3. Workers must exercise reasonable care that their acts or omissions do not adversely affect the health and safety of persons at a workplace. Occupation health and safety, work health and safety. The legislation also outlines the requirements for the reporting requirements for notifiable incidents. They discuss licences, permits, registrations, examples for persons engaged in high-risk work or users of certain types of plant or substances. There is a provision for worker consultation, participation and representation at that workplace. There's a provision for the resolution of health and safety issues, and there is also protection against discrimination. Okay. Occupation health and safety, work health and safety. Many specific details relating to work health and safety will be negotiated within the workplace in accordance with the legislation. It is important that you speak to your health and safety representative or your supervisor for more information on how these elements will affect your day-to-day operations or if you have any concerns relating to health and safety. Obtain and follow work instructions. Before starting work, you will need to obtain and confirm your work instructions. These can come in many different forms depending on the workplace and the job. Some instructions may be specific to the workplace, to a particular task or to a particular hand or power tool. Work instructions come in the form of verbal or written instructions, graphical instructions, signage, work schedules or work bulletins. Obtaining work instructions talk about plans and specifications. We talk about material safety data sheets, which are called MSDSs. We talk about charts and hand drawings. We talk about memos. We talk about diagrams or sketches. And we talk about manuals, instructions and equipment specific manuals and quality assurance procedures. We talk about quality requirements, which includes dimensions and tolerances, the standards of work required, material standards, safe work procedures or equivalent relating to hand and power tools. Obtaining instructions. You may be provided with your work instructions verbally and in written form, or you may be required to contribute to the planning and preparation process. To carry out your job properly, it is important that you are able to understand and follow all instructions that you are given. When obtaining or receiving instructions, it is important to employ effective communication skills. You should listen actively to the instructions and information provided to you. This means absorbing, understanding and considering the information before responding. Listen first and speak second. Clarify the information provided to you, ensuring that you express yourself clearly and directly, confidently, honestly, in a positive manner and with respect for others. Each industry and work site may have specific jargon and or terminology that it uses to communicate. This may include the technical terms that are specific to an industry or a specific piece of equipment. Become familiar with the language used on your worksite, and if you have any questions, speak to your supervisor or experienced personnel or workers on that site. Clear and direct speaking and active listening will ensure that everybody on the site knows what is required of them. In turn, activities on the worksite are conducted safely, collaboratively and effectively. Project quality requirements. A key source of information will be the job sheet or the project plan. This will detail the exact requirements for the project, including any specific quality standards. These quality standards can include things like efficiency, functionality, maintainability and reliability. These factors all influence the quality and timeliness of the project and or task. Okay, a number of skills are required to obtain and apply this information. These skills may include identifying the types of drawings and their functions, recognising amendments, recognising commonly used symbols and abbreviations, locating and identifying key features on a site plan, and reading and interpreting specifications. Planning work. A big part of planning out any job is to effectively manage your time. This includes allocating times to each step of the task. Having a good understanding of how long a job takes to do will help you to figure out what resources you need to complete it and when you will need them. Over a large project, this will allow your supervisor to correctly allocate the tools and equipment without holding up and or slowing down the work. Obtain, confirm and apply safety requirements. Once you have determined your work instructions, you need to ensure that all the necessary safety requirements are applied before you start work. These requirements include the legislative organisation and site requirements and procedures. You will need to access the site safety plan and the relevant related policies and procedures prior to starting any work task. The site safety plan will specify the safety requirements that need to be followed on that particular work site. Okay, safety requirements include safe work practices such as the correct application of protective clothing and equipment, the safe use of tools and equipment, knowledge of workplace environment and safety, safe handling of materials, correct use of firefighting equipment, correct application of first aid equipment, hazard control measures, correct procedures for handling hazardous materials and substances. Understanding your workplace emergency procedures related to equipment operation, which may include evacuation, emergency shutdown and stopping, extinguishing equipment fires and organisational first aid requirements. Obtain, confirm and apply safety requirements. All personnel and workers have a legislative duty of care requirement to work in a safe way to avoid harming themselves and protecting others from harm. Equipment safety. When working on a site, you will be using a variety of equipment and tools. Knowing how to use these safety is essential to keep you and those around you safe from harm, and will also assist you to complete all your tasks effectively. Read all documentation that applies to the tools and equipment you are using and ensure you are familiar with the common problems associated with the equipment and the management of these problems. Speaking with team members or team leaders who have used the equipment before will assist you in identifying any potential issues or problems. Safe work method statements. A safe work method statement, also referred to as a job safety analysis, is a good source of safety information that you may be required to access. A safe work method statement is a site-specific statement that is developed before work begins. It covers the job and the safety responsibilities of each member of the work group. It lists all the steps required to complete the task, which allow you to take responsibility for your own organisation and decide on work priorities, which is the order that you carry out the task. A safe work method statement provides a number of benefits. It outlines the safe method of work for a specific job. It provides an induction document that workers must read and understand before starting the job. It assists in meeting legal responsibilities for risk management process, hazard identification, risk assessment and risk control. It assists in effectively coordinating the work with materials required, the time required and the people involved to achieve a safe and efficient outcome. It is a quality assurance tool. Completing a safe work method statement. 1. You break the job down into logical steps, taking into consideration what is required to be achieved by the task. 2. Against each step, identify the workplace hazard in this activity, i.e. the ways that a person or plant could be injured or harmed or damaged during each step. 3. Decide on the measures required to mitigate hazards, i.e. what can be done to make the job safer and prevent injuries or harm that may occur. 4. Identify the roles and responsibilities for actions and outcomes to make sure risk controls are carried out and supervision of the process occurs. 5. Ensure the safe work method statement is fully understood by all workers prior to commencing work. Material safety data sheet. You will also find further information that may be relevant to the work at hand by checking the material safety data sheet, which is called the MSDS. These will detail any specific handling requirements for particular materials, any specific procedures to follow. It talks about risk controls, and it talks about emergency procedures. For hazardous material containers, there is usually a placard or label attached giving category of material, codes for handling issues, and contact number for expert advice should it be required. Materials handling is the movement of materials around a work site safely and efficiently. Materials handling involves a variety of methods and different equipment depending on the type of material that needs to be moved. Okay, there are some of the more common types of material handling equipment is now up on the screen. So we talk about wheelbarrows, we talk about hand trolleys, pallet jacks, we talk about forklifts, we talk about trucks, we talk about pallets, cranes, slings, containers, to name a few. You also need to have a good working knowledge of how to stack and store items as well as how to move them. This is necessary to minimise the risk of falling objects. Materials handling can also involve landscaping, excavation and or demolition. In these cases, materials would be things such as dirt, sand, rocks, broken masonry or debris. Tools, bulldozers and other heavy equipment are used to move these materials. You should always ensure that you refer to the relevant material safety data sheet for materials handling methods required for your site and for each task. Environmental protection requirements. Before carrying out any work with hand and power tools, it is important of you to be aware of and apply any environmental protective requirements for that work site. Environmental management plan. An environmental management plan aims to outline steps and processes required to prevent or minimise harm to the environment through the use of tools and equipment. This is overarching the plan that outlines the main environmental goals and how these goals will be achieved. The environmental management plan will detail information such as the work footprint, boundaries of the work activities, special protection areas, waste management, water quality protection, levels of acceptable noise, vibration levels, dust control measures, clean-up management. Care should also be taken to avoid negative impact on the environment through the duration of the work. Talk to the site supervisor for details about the organisation's environmental plan. Waste management. Waste management may include taking steps to use environmentally friendly materials, including recyclable materials. It also includes implementing methods of sorting waste into categories for recycling and correct disposal. Water and quality protection. Water quality protection measures may require you to direct runoff to areas where it will not get into the stormwater system. Other control measures might include the gravel socks being placed around stormwater intakes and installing erosion fencing where loose topsoil may be washed from the work site in rainy conditions. Noise control. Noise reduction and control methods may include restricted hours of operation wherever possible, so work does not occur between 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. Use of local power sources to reduce the use of generators, noise deadening materials such as rubber to line the insides of bins, noise barriers, screens or enclosures to reduce the noise from activity, and the use of PPE for those on site such as earmuffs or earplugs when using power tools. Vibration control. Vibration control techniques may include the use of deep saw cuts to minimise the transition of vibrations from pavement breaking operations to the foundations of nearby structures. Use of concrete cutters on pavement surfaces instead of pavement breakers where practical. Use of vibratory rather than impact pile drivers where feasible for the installation of retaining walls and other structural elements. Conducting vibration monitoring during highly disruptive construction activities such as pile driving and drilling, particularly if situated within 30 metres of a sensitive receptor. Traffic control. Scheduling of work to limit nighttime impacts in residential areas. Heightened attention and controls when working in historical districts and near historic structures, minimising the duration of vibration impacts. Clean-up management. Clean-up management will be discussed in a later section, and it may include sorting unused or leftover materials and debris for recycling, collecting and appropriately storing all rubbish until collection, providing bins on site for these materials. Dust management. Dust control techniques may include all vehicles transporting soil to or from work sites having their loads covered to minimise spillage and fugitive dust. Gravel cover applied to soil which unpaved surfaces where there is traffic on and off the work site. Vehicle wheels cleaned as necessary prior to leaving work sites to control tracking. Water or a dust erosion control agent applied as necessary by truck to an unpaved surfaces used for trucking during dry weather conditions. Dust screens used as feasible. All piles of soil and aggregate that could cause dust generation through wind erosion to be covered with a tarp and or watered down regularly. Regular clean-up of all materials deposited on public roadways and sidewalks from construction-related activities. Using labourers in or street shrewing equipment where necessary to clean paved surfaces. All stockpiles of soils designated for refuse placed on and covered with a waterproof material until removed for replacement elsewhere. Okay, that's the end of the first module. We'll get you to go to your formative assessment paper number 1 and complete the assessment. If you need any more information, it can be found in the pages of the Module 1 Learner book.